We are getting a little bit late. I know I said that we would all be itching to get outside, but I'm going to talk for a couple more minutes, but also about something completely different. We're going to change pace and change course a little bit, although it is firmly rooted in the idea of numbers. What certainly probably shouldn't start a sentence that way. What certainly would have been the focus of the American Jewish community this week, but for the tragic news coming out of Israel, would of course been the 2020 Pew survey on American Jewry. I don't know if it is a coincidence or somebody, someone in Pew was tuned in enough that they wanted to drop this during the week of Parshat Bamidbar. But this survey, the first one since 2013, gives us a picture of modern day Jewry in America. And it serves as a really interesting analog of the census we read about this morning. And so I wanted to spend just a couple minutes this morning talking about some of the stats that come out of this snapshot of Jewish life, and briefly kind of just sharing a couple thoughts about, what it could mean, or what I'm certainly going to continue to think about. And I'm sure in the coming weeks, we'll see a lot more writing and analysis of what was found in this study. So most clearly related to this numbers parsha is one clear takeaway number, right? Like, what is the Jewish population in America? And it stands at about 7.5 million Jews, which represents 2.5% of the American population. Interestingly, of those 7.5 million, about 25% of Jewish adults, so identifying as Jews, do not identify as Jews by religion, meaning they consider themselves Jewish by birth or by culture or by ethnicity, but they do not consider themselves religiously Jewish. So they are either have no religion, or atheist, or Buddhist, or some other classification, which I just thought was a really kind of fascinating number or a fascinating place to quantify yourself or qualify yourself. Other kind of standout numbers, and some of the ones that are kind of going to be most talked about and are already being most talked about. About 10% of American Jews identify as non-white, and in the Jewish community under 30 years old, that number climbs to 15%. There are other numbers that remain largely unchanged on the surface since 2013, including that 37% of American Jews identify as Reform, 17% identify as conservative, and 9% identify as Orthodox, and 32%, perhaps like many of us, not identifying with a denomination. But again, to highlight one of those big differences in the population of Jews under 30 years old, affiliation with conservative and Reform movements has dropped significantly, and affiliation with Orthodox movement and unaffiliated Jews, both of those identities are growing in under 30-year-old age group. And of course, when we talk about trends and demographics in the American Jewish population, we also need to talk about intermarriage. The rate of interfaith marriages over the past decade within the Jewish community is about 60%. And when we take out the Orthodox population, which intermarries at a much lower rate, it's closer to 75%. But the survey also found that about 2/3 of the children of interfaith marriages are being raised with some sort of Jewish identity. which led the researchers to conclude that the share of offspring of intermarriages who choose to be Jewish in adulthood seems to be rising. And to kind of close out the actual numbers that I'm going to present and highlight, 2 or kind of 2.5 that are certainly a little bit troubling. The first one, no surprise at all. Most American Jews believe that anti-Semitism in America is on the rise, and 51% of American Jews identify as having experienced anti-Semitism in the last year. And then about 70% of the Jewish population as a whole leans Democratic, but 70% of Orthodox Jews lean Republican. And as kind of a side shoot of that statistic, most Jews of no religion say they share little or nothing in common with Orthodox Jews, and half of Orthodox Jews say they share little or nothing in common with Reform Jews. So those are just some snippets from the report. I don't know how many of you have looked at it or have read articles. Like I said, there's a lot out there, and I believe in the coming weeks there will be a lot more. So there are some takeaways and things that I'm thinking about that I just kind of want to share with you, and of course open to hearing responses now or at another time. The first thing that I that popped into my head was, man, we need to find some Jews under 30 and talk to them and hear what they think and what's going on for them. I do feel like that. I think certainly in many Jewish communities and many religious communities, the question of like, how do we connect with young people is so prevalent and so present. And even just seeing kind of how they differ from the demographics that make up kind of the core population of most of our Jewish institutions is a gap that we need to continue to figure out how we bridge, because that's obviously where the future of not just the institutions but the Jewish people lies. I also think there are some really big and important issues around inclusivity, and that obviously again exists on the institutional level and the communal level. I think I'm talking to a group of people who will probably recognize the fact that ritual life is still really important and still serves as the kind of foundational pillar of our community in so many ways and in so many of our Jewish communities. But it also seems clear to me like we really do need to be thinking about what other avenues of engagement and inroads to a Jewish community we can offer besides just a schedule of services. And I don't think that comes as a surprise. I think it's something that's very much on my mind, and I think it's something that we are kind of working on within the CAA community, right? And whether that's the men's club or the women's group or chesed projects or so many other things that we have the potential to, that we're carrying out as a community and that we have the potential to really foster as a community. But I don't think anyone who's interested in Jewish life, we can necessarily say, come on Saturday morning, because that's going to work for you. And I wish it would, but I think we need to think a little bit more critically than that. And I think also in terms of inclusivity, we need to make sure that our communities and our institutions are really welcoming, whether that's welcoming to interfaith families, whether that is welcoming to people who are interested in Judaism, whether that's blended families or whether that's Jews of color, who statistically make up 1 out of every 10 Jews, but still face a lot of stigmatism within Jewish communities and have a difficult time walking into communal Jewish spaces and Jewish institutions. And I think that no Jewish institution, certainly not a synagogue or any Jewish community group, should have interested people walking in and walking out because they felt unwelcome or othered. And to return to that last kind of two stats that I raised, like so many other groups and divisions within America, we in the Jewish community need to be really, really aware of the divisions amongst ourselves. You know, when we're only talking about a population of 7.5 million people, we can't have that be split into groups that don't talk to or recognize each other. That's certainly not something that will build the sustainability of the Jewish people in the 21st century. I'm even thinking about relating it a little bit to this morning's Parsha, you know, thinking a little bit about the tribal divisions, right? And these divisions into quarters and how it's not that far off from this moment of what seems like real unity. We're not that far off in biblical history from splitting into the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And we all know that didn't end well. And so, you know, yes, there are divisions within the Jewish community that are really hard to overcome. You know, certainly it can be really hard to relate to other people who are Jews who, you know, do not look like us, do not practice like us, who might not be as open and inclusive to our lifestyles as we would like them to be. But we also just can't write them off. That's not the way that Judaism is going to thrive into the 21st century. And obviously, like I said, figuring out how to bridge divides, how to engage in dialogue, how to talk to people who don't agree with us, and who we don't agree with them. That's a challenge that extends far beyond the Jewish community, and really in American society, if we want to work towards a more stable and productive America in the coming years and decades, that's something we all need to get much better at.